going on, everybody? This is Bobby Bookworm, formerly known as Bobby G. And as some of you may guess, judging by this video, especially with the signature hat, Saturday Shpiel is back. This is the first one I've done after coming back from sabbatical. For those who don't know, Saturday Shpiel is something that I've been doing now for about a year, a little over. And what I do is I give every week, with the exception of a few weeks here and there if I'm really busy or I'm on sabbatical. What I do is I give a reading of what's going on in the Messianic congregations. Now, traditionally in most Jewish synagogues, there are two readings every week, one from the Torah and the Haftorah, which are the books of Moses, and the rest of the Old Testament, which could be either from the Nevi'im, which is the prophets, or the Chetuvim, which is the writings. Also, there is, in my case being a Messianic, we have three readings, one from the Brit Chadashah, as well as the other two. The Brit Chadashah means New Covenant, or more commonly known as the New Testament. In this week, the readings are from the Torah. We have Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1 to chapter 11, verse 47. So from chapter 9 all the way through chapter 11 in Leviticus. From the Haftarah, it is 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 17. And the Brit Chadashah, depending on where you go, if you go to Chosen People Ministries and that calendar, it is Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 15. If you go to TorahPortions.org, which I usually do both, it is Matthew chapter 3, verses 11 through 17. Now, the particular theme or the tagline for this particular post is called Keep It Kosher. Here's what I mean by keep it kosher. In Leviticus, when we read through, we see the getting ready to set up their ministry and to begin things. And then we see unauthorized fire by two of Aaron's sons. Aaron is the first high priest, and so they get punished for that. And then there is also what's known as kashrut for holiness. And kashrut is basically food laws. It basically says what you can and can't eat. Long story short, you can't eat anything that parts the hoof but does not chew the cud, or chews the cud but does not part the hoof. And it gives a list of certain animals that they can and cannot have on land. There are certain birds that they can't eat, which includes kites, hawks, vultures, eagles, etc. In terms of what kind of fish or sea creatures they can eat fish if it has fins and scales, and that's it. That comes from the water. And then as far as insects go, all they can do is they can eat any kind of locust, any kind of katydid, any kind of cricket, and any kind of grasshopper, but that's it. So it's very specific of what you can and cannot have. Also, it kind of shows a lot of sanitary laws and a lot of basic stuff so they can keep themselves kosher. Now, in 2 Samuel, we have David bringing the ark into the city. Well, thing about the ark, if you know anything about Torah in Exodus and Leviticus, is that the ark is supposed to be made a certain way, which it still had been, and it's supposed to be carried a certain way. It's not supposed to be put on a cart, it's supposed to be carried, specifically by the Levites and or the Levitical priesthood. Well, David didn't do that at first, so he got punished for it, and then later he did bring it in to the chagrin of one of his wives, specifically former King Saul's daughter, which King David had become the ruler of Israel at this point. And God kind of told him to slow down when he wanted to build the temple, and God was basically like, your son who's going to come after you, he's going to build the temple, and I'm going to establish this throne forever, which some would argue this is a messianic prophecy. And this comes to David from the prophet Nathan. And in the Brit Chadashah, in both Hebrews, we see with regards to the priesthood of Melchizedek, or Melech Zedek, which means king of righteousness. And in Matthew 3, verses 11 through 17, we see Jesus, or Yeshua, as he would have really been known, being baptized by Yochanan the Immerser, aka John the Baptist. For those who want to know, by the way, specifically with regards to Matthew, when Jesus gets baptized, it's not like, John just kind of sprinkles or throws a little taste on him. That's not what happens. Baptism, or baptismo, which comes from Greek, means to immerse, so which means Jesus or Yeshua, as he would have been known, would have been dunked, as most Protestant denominations do. Now, God eventually says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased," which meant Yeshua was kosher. Eventually, going back to Samuel, what David eventually did is he made sacrifices and he danced before the Lord, and he broke out the band, cymbals, flutes, lyres. He broke out the band. Which, by the way, sidebar, anyone who thinks that band worship is not kosher in churches, you should probably read Psalm 115. You should probably read that passage where David is bringing the ark into the tent that he prepared for it. But that's an aside. That being said, one of the things that we're also taught to do when we look at three passages is we're trying to find what is the common factor between all three. What is the common thread that goes through all of them? In the case of what happens with regards to Leviticus, Samuel, and Matthew, Hebrews, is that we see what is kosher, what is cool with God, and what is not. In the case of Leviticus and the Torah and the half-Torah, what you don't do is you don't go against God's command. When God tells you you're supposed to carry the ark, you carry the ark. When God tells you this is what you can eat, this is what you can't eat, this is how you sacrifice to me, this is how you don't sacrifice to me. What it all comes down to when I say keep it kosher is it means being obedient unto God. It means being obedient to the Lord in such a way that is right in His eyes. And the way to know what is right in His eyes is to follow Scripture, is to follow the readings that we do every week. And, that is how we have an idea of what it is to keep right with God. Also, not just reading His Word, but also being in prayer to God. Because part of the reason that David kind of pulled back from building a house to the Lord is because Nathan the prophet had a word from God for him and said, hey, pump the brakes. That time is going to come, but it's not by you. Now, given the times that we live in, one of the things that's also important, especially when you go back to Leviticus, when you go back to Torah, is the point of all the things that God was having Israel do, or the children of Israel do, at the time when they came out of Egypt, is because He was trying to make them distinct from all the nations. If you look at historical practices of pagan cults or what have you, what God was effectively having Bnei Israel do was the complete opposite of what the other nations were doing, with maybe the exception of the sacrificial system. But even then, how they sacrificed and what they sacrificed was also a very different way of doing things compared to the rest of the nations. And this is why I say you have to keep things kosher, which means following Yeshua, following His Word, and following what He teaches and what He does over time, right? And these are the things that we need to remember, because biblical illiteracy is up, which means things are very unkosher, if you will, in the church and in, other places. And it's getting wild out here. But if you know the Word, if you stay in prayer, then you will be guided well. And if you have people around you who can teach you, who can mentor you, and whom you can mentor, because those of us who are older are to pass it down, this information, and are pass down these teachings to our young people, so that, and our brothers and sisters, so that they can know how they're supposed to go. I hope that you were able to follow this teaching for today. And I hope that you are able to take something from it. Lord willing, I will see you guys next week, and we will continue until my next sabbatical next year. Lord willing, we will continue to do these Saturday Shpiels and keep this going. My name is Bobby G, aka Bobby Bookworm. This is my Saturday Shpiel. Hopefully I'll see you all next week. Peace.